My first post this week was about Diamond Green Diesel, the massive renewable diesel manufacturer here in the United States. Specifically, I looked at the financial performance of the two parties in the Diamond Green Diesel joint venture, and that is Valero, the massive independent petroleum refiner, and Darling Ingredients. It's a company that processes animal waste to create all kinds of feeds and fuel stocks. And so you get a sense of that's why they're partnered up. Is Darling specializes in finding these renewable feedstocks that can be used to ultimately create diesel, the renewable diesel. Valero specializes in having the refining apparatus to transform these organic bio-based feedstocks into the renewable diesel. What we see is that Valero is the much larger of the two partners in this project. Valero has 7 times the market cap. It has 23 times the revenue. But Darling is more profitable. Its operating margin is 5 points wider than Valero's is. And its stock price to operating earnings ratio is higher than Valero's is. What that shows us is something we've seen a bunch of times in our energy analysis that investors are concerned. They're curious about what happens to petroleum refining going forward. What happens specifically when fossil based fuel demand starts to decline. And so we see more runway in investors' minds for Darling than we see in Valero. My second post this week was about Neste. They are a massive Finnish energy company that about 60% of the revenue comes from petroleum refining, about 40% comes from renewable fuels. The reason I wanted to look at Neste's performance in the first part of the year was to understand, knowing how weak the refining financial performance has been across that sector. Has biofuels offered any sort of protection to the financial weakness that we've seen in refining? The short answer is no. Um, Neste has two segments, the refining segment, the biofuel segment, and both revenues are down over 10%, and both margins have shrunk by nearly 10 percentage points. And so what we see is even in the biofuels world, where you're not buying crude oil, so you're not levered against that part of the petroleum equation, you still are levered against the markets for finished petroleum products. And what that means is that even Neste is not seeing any sort of counter-cyclical protection from being so heavily engaged in biofuels. You still have the same exposure that you do, even if you're just a pure petroleum refinery. So it's an interesting anecdote to take with us as we move into 2025. My third post was about inflation. And I wanted to do a survey of inflation as we're entering the new year to better understand where exactly we are right now. And then we can pay attention to how we evolve from this point. Energy prices are actually below where they were a year ago. So it has negative inflation rates at the moment. Food and all other items inflation have both been trending down over the past 12 months. Food energy inflation has dropped by 0.5 percentage point. All other items has dropped by 0.7 point. There's still a little bit, food's a little bit over 2%. All other items are a little bit over 3% inflation. So a shade above where the Fed wants them, but they are trending back down toward that more to the targeted level. With the new administration coming in, there's some forces that I wrote about that might push inflation rates up. There are other forces that might push inflation rates down. It's going to be an interesting dynamic to pay attention to as the new administration takes hold and charts a path forward. My fourth post was about my newest post at Foundations of Energy. And my new post there is all about these biofuels. So I wrote about ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, renewable natural gas. I even wrote about an attempt to synthesize natural gas directly from air. And my point in that post was to catalog some of these technologies and to point out that while the world may pivot away from fossil fuels eventually, there are other ways to make those same hydrocarbons. We don't have to dig them up out of the ground and use them that way. That's by far the most economical way to do it today, is to dig them up out of the ground and use them that way. But the world is working with great intensity on trying to find ways to synthesize these hydrocarbons ourselves so that we can get all the benefits that hydrocarbons offer while mitigating many of the environmental concerns with combusting them. My last post of this week was a strange one. It was about the Beatles. I am watching Peter Jackson's 2021 documentary, The Beatles Get Back, and it's a documentary using some footage from the 1969 Let It Be recording sessions. And in the documentary, in the second part of the documentary, Paul McCartney is getting very frustrated about the Beatles' lack of progress. And John Lennon has talked about how, he's not feeling his best. He apologized for showing up late that day. He was up late the night before doing drugs and watching films. And Paul's heart was broken, and he made a very emotional appeal about the importance of being productive and of not wandering around aimlessly, of working against a schedule, of achieving something every single day. It really hit me hard. So I wrote a post about Paul McCartney's message around productivity and how all of us can take advantage of that kind of lesson in our professional lives. Each weekend, I send out a free weekly newsletter that includes links to and summaries of all the research that I publish online. That way, you don't have to rely on social media algorithms to surface any of that stuff for you. You have it all in one place. I also include an energy related anecdote, insight, or observation that I don't share anywhere else. Even if you've seen all the stuff I've shared online, you will still have something new to read in the newsletter. If you haven't signed up for that, feel free to click the link. I'll put one in my bio. I'll almost certainly put one down below. And if you've not checked out Foundations of Energy, that's over on Substack. You can just search for Foundations of Energy there. That's the learning and development tool that I've built for energy professionals. As always, thanks so much for reading, watching, liking, commenting. I really appreciate it. I hope you're having a fantastic start to the new year, and we will talk soon.